So next we're bringing out Tulaine Montgomery. We're really excited to have her. She's the entrepreneur, educator, writer, and organizer. She's the co-CEO of New Profit, which is a venture philanthropy organization that backs visionary leaders who are scaling innovations and transforming our nation's broken and inequitable systems. She's also a trusted advisor to many nonprofits, providing strategic and financial support to many of our nation's most promising social innovations. And she leads New Profit's Inclusive Impact, a social impact fund providing growth capital and capacity support for Black, Latinx, and Indigenous social impact leaders. So we're really excited to have her here and hear from her. So here to talk about the power of proximity, please give it up for Tulaine.
Well, hello. We're back together again. Y'all know how I do it. Hey. I love it. So listen, I'm so happy to be here. I was really honored to be here with you last year, receiving an Innovator of Color Award, but I have to tell you, despite all the chaos around us, I am so thankful to be, like all of you in this room, alive and contributing at this particular moment in time. Because see, whether we want to or not, we are all playing a pivotal role in social impact at a key moment in our shared human history. I mentioned this last year, but I want to remind us that in 5 years, this experiment that we call the United States of America will be 250 years old. I said this last year, but again want to remind you that this year that we're living in, 2022, marks the first year that the United States will have been an independent nation for as long as chattel slavery lasted on its soil. So these milestones, they are a galvanizing moment, right? It's an opportunity for us to reimagine the very foundations of our society. We have a responsibility to deliver on the promise of an America where everyone can thrive. That's what we're all here for, and that's what we're all about. But we're facing this moment as a highly fragmented nation, fragmented across identity and ideology. Caught up in a storm of collective fear and fatigue, the Surgeon General referenced this last night. It's impacting our young people, but it's also impacting all of us. One of my personal heroes, James Baldwin, says, "Our children rarely listen to their elders, but they never fail to imitate them." Right? So what if this collective sadness and loneliness that we're discussing amongst young people, what if that sadness and loneliness is simply a reflection of what we're holding as the adults responsible for their care? We've been so focused on the storm, we haven't really taken the time to understand what's on the other side. A storm doesn't always just come to clear the way and destroy. Sometimes a storm is here to open a new pathway so that you can get right to the heart of the matter. And I believe that that's the moment that we're in. Because listen, this is it. The time is now, and we're the ones. Really, everyone in this room has had some role to play in caring for a child, whether you're a parent, an auntie, a cousin, a sibling, right? A family friend. And a lot of us in this room are educators. That means that all of us, every one of us, we know what it takes to raise and care for a child. We know the humility, the consistency, the love, the adaptation that it takes to parent a child effectively. So think about it. If we know what it takes to raise a child, consider what it takes to raise a nation. It's not presumptuous or naive to believe that we can have a tremendous impact. We get to decide what happens in this grand experiment that we call American democracy. The chaos that we see is not more than we can handle, and our aspirations are not beyond us. Every system that we're working to change was designed by a group of human beings who determined how their beliefs would show up in the world that they lived in. So here we are, a group of human beings. And so the question is, what will we design? What will we decide? How will we get it done? And how will we heal the fragmentation, fear, and fatigue that we're all observing and experiencing? Yesterday, I had a conversation with Dr. Vivek Murthy, our Surgeon General, and we talked about how community is medicine. Human beings are herd creatures. That's H-E-R-D, not H-U-R-T. Some of us are herding, but we're physiologically designed to seek and foster connection. Today, in this room with all of you, I want to talk more about connection. We keep talking about connection because it bears repeating and it's counterculture. I want to explore the mental models that hold us back from the innovation and systems change that we're actually poised to achieve. And I want to challenge us to make the most of this time together here in San Diego and to bring new ideas about collective impact back to our communities. If we believe that the poison that threatens our health and our democracy is fragmentation, then getting closer to one another is the antidote. When we come back to thinking about what it takes to raise a nation, let's remember what we already know about what it takes to lovingly raise a child. When we're born as human beings, all of us are completely dependent on those around us. Then as we grow into adolescence, our primary goal is independence. We fight and we fight hard to be independent. But as we mature into adulthood, we come to learn that interdependence is the way that we can thrive. And so we need to talk about how proximity is about honoring our interdependence. We need each other, including those who are different from us. We need to build workplaces and schools that recognize that there really is no other in a thriving democracy. No one is expendable. But here's the thing, those are nice words, but we're not set up to live that way right now. In most cases, if we default to our national norms, we don't live, work, or worship with people who are different from us. As one indicator, 75% of people who identify as white race identity in this country have social networks that are entirely white. 75%, 3 out of 4. It's more than 80% of our large metropolitan cities in the US are more segregated today than they were in 1990. So we're regressing and becoming more segregated in our most sort of bustling urban centers around this country. Workplaces in the US are more segregated today than they were in 1970. Again, we're regressing, and regressing quickly. At least 80% of American churches have congregations dominated by a single racial or ethnic group. And listen, there is beauty in affinity groups. People who share the same identity absolutely need to and must spend time in community, loving what they share, loving their shared story, and loving their lineage. So this is not about that being a bad thing. However, if that's the only thing, then we miss the opportunity to benefit from the collective good that we can do together across identity. Am I making sense? All right. We're a small group in this room, so we can actually talk to each other. That's the benefit. We can just talk. I love it. So, here's the thing, right? None of us have actually lived in an equitable world. None of us. We've dreamed about it, envisioned it, sometimes thought about it and gotten scared and talked ourselves out of it being feasible. But none of us have actually lived in an equitable world. So that means if equity is truly our goal, which I believe it is, that we need to humble ourselves enough to recognize that we all have a lot more to learn. And the best source to learn is one another. That's why we're talking today about the power of proximity. The medicine is right here on the other side of doing what's familiar for us. We need to change the algorithm. Building relationships across identity and ideology is counterculture. But it's a move that's vital for the future of our multiracial, multi-ethnic, and intergenerational society. We've got to combat the trend to remove ourselves from people who don't live and look like we do. We got to break out of the doom and gloom feedback loop. We can change the algorithm. We can change the way we see the world and the way our children see it. If we can take stock of the horrendous, difficult, and challenging, then we absolutely must take stock of the restorative, generative, and creative. And that's a lot of what we're here to do at this event, to learn about the solutions, the innovations, and build relationships that enable us to create a new narrative. As human beings, we need each other, and we need stories that energize and feed us. So proximity is how we get closer to each other, and that's also, we believe, how you get to breakthrough solutions. because the most powerful solutions, more often than not, they come from the people who are closest to the aspirations, challenges, and systems that we seek to support. Now, you've been hearing that a lot. That rhetoric is becoming increasingly popular. But we haven't actually changed our protocols, our hiring practices, our funding criteria, our social networks to reflect that belief. So I'm going to say the belief one more time because it is core to us actually benefiting from the range of identities in the society. More often than not, the breakthrough solutions, the sustainable innovations, the systems change that we're all here to support comes from people who have proximity to the issues, systems, and communities that we want to support, whether we're funders, investors, technological experts, parents, educators. At New Profit, the venture fund that I run with my co-CEO, Vanessa Kirsch, we committed to closing a resource gap that we identified in 2020. In 2020, we got support from the Gates Foundation and found that organizations that were led by Black, Latinx, and Indigenous social entrepreneurs were receiving only 4% of philanthropic support. That's one form of capital, but it's a strong indicator of national trends. Yet most of the organizations were meant to serve Black, Latinx, and Indigenous communities. So that gap is not only unjust, it's also not smart. It just doesn't make sense that we would underinvest in the people who have leadership and insight to the communities we are saying we want to support and serve and protect in ways that we historically have not. So at New Profit, we committed to closing that resource gap by raising a $100 million social impact fund, focusing on providing growth capital to Black, Latinx, and Indigenous innovators. But the capital, while it matters, is not the most important thing. What's important is who we're able to support and the type of leadership we can support with that capital. Incredible organizations that many of you know that are represented here. Organizations like Beyond 12, Push Black, Castle, Girl Trek, Mind Right. It goes on and on because there is an abundance of innovation, genius, and capability in communities of color. So how can we rapidly switch the story of underinvestment and underestimation of these very communities? So proximity is not an act of charity. That's important for me to say. It's not an act of charity. It has nothing to do with charity, in fact. Frankly, it is self-serving for those of us who want to seek change to invest in proximate leadership. It enables our agenda. Proximity is where genius resides. We don't support innovators of color because the resource gap is unfair, though it absolutely is. We don't support innovators of color because it's the right thing to do, though yes, there's absolutely a moral mandate to transform the way that we do investing and philanthropic support. Supporting innovators of color isn't about diversity, though diversity is a wonderful byproduct of these strategies. We support innovators of color because we believe in their genius and impact, period. So it doesn't take as long as we think to see measurable change. We just have to build the will. It's not complex. We just have to build the will. Since New Profit made our commitments in 2020, we have radically altered the composition of our portfolio of grantees. As one example, small sample size, but worth sharing. 2 years ago, organizations led by people of color accounted for about 30% of our grantees. Now, it's 80%. So in 2 years, we were able to transform how we connect to and support proximate insight and proximate expertise. And we believe if we can do it, it's something that we can all do. It's not hard, it just takes will. So I challenge you all to do two things while you're here this week to change your algorithm. First, change the narrative. Seek out stories about connection, coalition building, and proximate innovation. There are plenty of them in the Proximity, Parent Power, and Learner Voice track. And I want to highlight a couple of these sessions. There's many great sessions. I'm going to quickly highlight a couple just to make it easier for you to find your way. Listen to stories from 3 amazing organizations who are bringing proximate voices into education and workforce policy conversations at the session called Proximate Policy that's actually happening today at 2:10 p.m. Or hear how funders are building trust and partnership with communities and proximate social entrepreneurs in the proximate philanthropy session that's happening at 3:50 today. Tomorrow morning at 10:10 a.m., join me for a live podcast recording with the leaders of CASEL, a leading institution around social emotional learning, to understand how a new generation of activists is using connection and inclusion to change the world. So don't make it, here's the thing, you don't have to make it hard and you don't have to make it weird. Have a conversation with someone from outside your network or identity and simply connect, human to human. And it's not silly, it's not trite, it's essential. Because how will we learn how to work across identity if we don't have relationships with people who don't live and look like we do? It's the simplest thing in the world, but if we believe in the genius of the human spirit and our desire to connect, then we know that connecting can transform the world. When we connect with those who are different from us, and we do so outside of a dynamic of power or dominance, we get closer to the ideas and solutions that enable us to benefit from the abundant genius that exists in this country. When geese fly together in a V-shaped formation, have y'all ever seen that? Right? It's not just to help each other find the way. It's actually the V-shaped formation increases their collective velocity. It's a beautiful example that we can draw from. The bird at the front of the formation actually rotates that position. They take turns. They're so in sync that they can take turns because it's hard to be in that front position. The wind is hitting you and slicing you. And you know the loud sounds that those flocks make? That's about cheering one another on. Keep going, keep going, keep going. So take the steps to connect in ways that enable you to be part of a formation that can transform the world. We are the group. We are connected to those outside of this event that can contribute. And now is absolutely the time. Thank you.